Hi, good morning. Coming to you from Brighton, my Dingley Dell. So I was speaking with a client yesterday, and made me talking about writing a sales page, her sales page, and started talking about bringing emotion into writing your sales copy. And I think this is a really important concept to understand because, well, let's just start with the most common emotion that people think of with anything salesy, quote unquote, and it's fear. People, humans, can be driven to take action through fear. It's a very powerful emotion. It's a very powerful driver. We see this played out in life every day, in politics, in all sort of facets of life. And so it's no different when you're selling your product or service to your audience. Now, the problem with fear is that yes, it gets people to take action, but it can be at the expense of your brand authenticity. So for coaches, therapists, wellness, entrepreneurs in general, you don't really want to be instilling or provoking fear in your audience, because it doesn't feel nice and it won't feel authentic to your brand and to what it is that you do. You want to help people. You don't want to make them feel scared. And I think that because fear works so well and we see it used a lot, that's the association, and that's where that kind of sleazy, sort of icky selling thing comes from. You see things like, if you're overweight, this bad thing's going to happen, that bad thing's going to happen. Buy my product or join my, join my gym or do this to avoid this horrible fate. So it's often used in the context of scaring people into taking action around their health, into scaring people into taking action around money, trying to sell something that's going to get people out of financial strife, and really, honing in on the fear that they're feeling around financial insecurities. So there's certainly corners of, or niches and industries that trade in on this emotion of fear a lot. And it's, and I think that's kind of where we go when we think about selling, So with, with being in a different industry, being a coach, and this is, and I appreciate this because it can be really hard to find examples of good copy that isn't fear-based in that kind of niche, because it's not as easy to do. Okay, it's not as easy. It's easy to find a fear or a pain point and really kind of dig into it and then sort of almost manipulate people into buying something, because you're saying, look, if you buy my thing, I'll take that fear away. So when it's more important to you about your brand, about your voice, about the relationship you've got with your audience, and about the way you want your clients to feel about working with you, then using fear, poking fear too much is just not going to work. Because you're not going to do it properly. You're not going to go all in because it doesn't feel right. And it's just not going to be aligned with everything else that you'll promote, the other ways that you promote yourself. Hi, Barry. But there are other emotions that we can use. You can use aspiration and hope, and you can have a real tone in your sales copy that is a more positive tone. And one easy way to do this is to, you could look at lots of pain points and you could think about, okay, my people are afraid for this reason, and then flip it. And then instead of it being a negative focus, you can take that exact same scenario, symptom, whatever's going on in their lives, and you can flip it and give it a positive spin. And if you do that, and if you do that consciously while you're writing, the whole tone of your sales copy will be much more positive. And it's something I go through in my copywriting course for coaches, to, how to kind of work through this, making sure that you're still listening and empathizing with the struggles. So we're not dismissing them, but framing things in such a way that you're tapping into much more positive emotions than negative emotions. I'm just trying to think of an example. So, for example, if you're a productivity coach, let's say, and you're working with entrepreneurs and you're helping them avoid burnout or recover from burnout, and you do that by helping them to organize their time and their productivity so that, all the stresses around having their business start to become less stressful, and they're more in control of their time. So the fear-based approach would be really focusing on how bad they're feeling, how it's affecting their family, how it's affecting their mental health. There's lots of sort of negatives around it, and you can use that a bit, dial into that a little bit, but you can also flip it and talk about give examples of someone who worked with you and who now is feeling a lot better, or share a study that shows that if you can get a handle on your time and work fewer hours, you actually make more money. And so it's a subtle difference, but it's a more positive spin on what it is, like how you're communicating with your audience, and also how your product, the program, solves their specific problem. So I'm just keeping an eye on the dog. This whole idea of the emotional tone of your copy is really, really important. And I might go into it in a bit more depth another time, because there's some good examples of how it's done, of how this can be done. Like, it's not even in just writing, it's in all kinds of genres. It's how, films make us feel a certain way. It can tell the same story, but depending on the way that it's told, then it's either it gives you a positive feeling, or it can give you a negative feeling. And so, it's all about how things are framed and contextualized. And it's as true in your sales copy as it is in any other kind of context, communication context, or storytelling context. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Happy Wednesday. It's my girls' birthday today. They're 6. And so I'm going to go home and see them off before they go to school. And see you next week. Okay, bye.